And because I don't have the train any longer, I'm going to use as a basis for the conversation this exploded view of the 21801. I apologize that we have to use that, but I think it will be beneficial. This focuses in on the core of the powertrain right in here, which is in fact very easy to disassemble. You can see the spring holder right here for the springs, the brush springs, the brush mount bracket, which is that one right there. There's the brush holders and the brushes. All that is just so easy to disassemble. Again, if you don't feel comfortable, take some photographs beforehand. This is what Mr. Barker was talking about. This is the brush and bearing cap that might have to be re-drilled. I didn't do it because I didn't find that the armature was rattling around. And I had a conversation with somebody I think is one of the top 3 restorers of American Flyer trains in the United States. He mentioned that he didn't feel like the relationship between the armature and the field were correct on this train, and therefore it was part of its heat production. Well, that could certainly be true if this axle or rod or shaft of the armature is rattling in its bearing points and allowing it to touch or rub up against the field. May even cause some shorts. I didn't find that, but I did find that the armature's lamentations did not match the lamentations of the field. In other words, it was protruding out one end of the field. And I have had success in other trains, steam locomotives, diesel, in centering the armature laterally inside the field. In other words, making sure that it was all the way up underneath the field in both ends without exposing any of the lamentations. And I wanted to check that out. Now, the only thing I had to do to get it past that disassembly point, you remember in the other photograph I was showing this piece right here, which is called the bearing and mount assembly. Right here is metal. In order to get that off and get full access to the armature, I had to pull that plastic gear off. Now that made me nervous. It is plastic. I didn't want to bang on it, put it under any stress to pull it off. So I had to think long and hard about how I was going to get that off and minimize the chance that I damaged that plastic. Could it be replaced? Yeah, there's spares. You can buy them again, but why do that if you can get it off? And I came up with the idea of using a wheel puller, and it was perfect. As you know, the diesel wheel pullers have the 2 lift bars that go up underneath the wheel, and then a pin that provides an opposing force to push the axle out. Well, it was perfect here too. So I could distribute the force on this piece of plastic, and I could use opposing forces to strengthen the pulling of this out, and it worked perfectly. Now, pushing it back in was a little more tedious because you had to bang on it a little bit to get it down in there, but I figured out a way to make at least the banging to be uniform. Now, what I wanted to show you are these right here. That's a space washer. That is a fiber washer. That is a fiber washer, and that is a space washer. Those fiber washers have to go back in, no doubt. If they're missing or torn up, you're just going to have to buy some from port lines to replace them. If the armature touches either one of these assemblies on the end, particularly that one, but also down here, it's got to be insulated. So it's a given. Number 14 in each case has got to be on there up against the armature. 13s are nothing more than the same kind of space washers that are used on steam locomotives. And what I found is that if I added a particular thickness, and I keep 3 different thicknesses of these spacing washers, I was able to center the field center the armature's lamentations under the field. The next thing I did, it was based on a recommendation from Mr. Barker, and that is I pulled out the brushes and the brush holders, and I replaced them with brand new ones. Now, when I recentered the armature, it made the touch point of the brush to be different than it had been before. Now ground the armature down just a little bit, excuse me, the commutator down just a little bit to get it more flat and even. But Mr. Barker recommends that to file down the tips of the brushes right here on the brush holder and make them flat. That gives them an opportunity to readjust to the surface of the commutator and fit it hopefully better and touch it more consistently, thus possibly reducing the number of sparks. And I believe that it actually did. So while it was completely disassembled, I put in 2 new brush holders and brushes. I filed down the ends of the brushes, and you have to do that very carefully because this brush metal is carbon and it's very, very soft. It's like filing down a pencil lead. But I filed them down to where they were flat. And when I put it back in and started it running, even though it was rough, it soon made an adjustment to the contour of the commutator and made the same shape on the end of the brush, and I think improved it. That was the key, I think, to making this run so much better, because after I did that, I could see a remarkable improvement in this train, and I encourage you to go watch the videos of these railhead tests on this to see how smooth it is, and actually relatively quiet. So again, 14 carbon, 13 are metal. There's space. I added, I think, one of a particular thickness that may be different from your train that made the armature seat more squarely underneath the field without any of its lamentations showing on either end, which means maximum lamentation within the presence of each other. I, of course, cleaned the armature thoroughly. I ground down the commutator. I put in new brushes. I filed the tips of the brush itself flat, very gently until it was flat, cleaned all the dust off of them, reinstalled them, and then let them run for a while until they adjusted to the contour. Because again, when I move that armature just a little bit, now let's pretend that I moved it in that direction, it gave the brushes a new contact point on the commutator that it had not had before. So they readjusted to that contour and just began running great. I told the owner of 812 that when I first put it back on the track, it was jumping and spittering and sputtering, but I kept it going and just let it go. It wasn't running all that smoothly, and then all of a sudden, bam, the thing just took off, smooth as silk, with a lot of response, a lot of power, and a lot of tractive force. And I believe it was because it adjusted everything to the motor that had been relubricated and recleaned, and it was ready to perform. Again, I encourage you, watch the videos of 812, 504, and of course 21801. Thanks to everyone who watched this video to the end. Please subscribe to the channel to see more of this content. Give a like or comment as you see fit. And above all, remember, the trains are the show.